The plate shattered against the tiled kitchen floor, sending shards of ceramic and forgotten olives skittering like escaped secrets across the sun-warmed terracotta. "I can't do this anymore, Madeline. I'm leaving for good this time." Cora's voice cracked like the dry Andalusian earth after a summer storm. Her blue eyes, those damn piercing blues that had hooked me from day one, now rimmed red with the kind of exhaustion that comes from loving too hard and losing too often. I reached for her, my hand brushing the air where her shoulder had been a heartbeat ago, but she was already turning, the door slamming behind her like the final punctuation on a sentence neither of us wanted to end. That was 6 months ago, in the cramped apartment we'd shared on the outskirts of Seville, where the air always smelled of orange blossoms and regret. I'd come to Spain on a whim, a 6-month sabbatical from my dead-end graphic design job in Brooklyn, chasing the ghost of a freer life amid the flamenco rhythms and tapas bars of Western Andalusia. Madeline Harper, 28 and freshly divorced from a man whose idea of romance was takeout Thai on Fridays, that's me. I figured the sun-soaked hills and ancient ruins would patch up the holes in my heart, or at least distract me long enough to forget how I'd spent my 20s pretending to be someone I wasn't. Straight, settled, safe. Lies, all of it. Cora Ellis crashed into my world like a rogue wave off the Atlantic coast. I met her at a hole-in-the-wall cafe in Huelva, the kind of place where locals nurse cortados and tourists fumbled with phrasebooks. She was 30, an American expat who traded her high-powered corporate law gig in Chicago for olive groves and freelance writing, her blonde hair catching the light like spun gold, as she argued passionately with the barista over the proper way to foam milk. "It's an art, not a science," she declared, her Midwestern accent cutting through the Spanish chatter like a clarinet in a mariachi band. I laughed. Couldn't help it, and she turned, those blue eyes locking onto mine with the intensity of someone who just found her next story. We talked for hours that afternoon, spilling our guts over plates of patatas bravas and glasses of Rioja. She was funny, sharp as a switchblade, with a laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep and unguarded. Divorced too, she admitted. From a woman who'd left her for a yoga instructor in Bali. "Turns out Downward Dog was more appealing than my courtroom dramatics," she quipped, but there was a shadow in her voice, a flicker of the wound she hid behind that confident smile. By sunset, we'd exchanged numbers, and just like that, Cora became my anchor in this foreign sea. The one who dragged me to hidden beaches in the Danana National Park, where we'd lie on the sand and debate everything from Proust to the ethics of bullfighting, our fingers brushing accidentally on purpose as the waves whispered secrets to the shore. It wasn't long before the accidents turned intentional. Our first kiss happened under a canopy of jacaranda trees in a quiet plaza in Cadiz, the purple blooms raining down like confetti from some forgotten parade. She tasted like salt and sangria, her hands framing my face as if I were the fragile artifact she'd been searching for in all those dusty museums. "I've been waiting for you," she murmured against my lips, and God, I believed her. For the first time in years I felt seen, not as the girl who'd faked her way through heteronormative milestones, but as Madeline, raw and real with all my jagged edges. We moved fast, the way you do when exile feels like homecoming. She sublet her place in the hills outside Seville, and I extended my visa, trading freelance gigs for mornings spent sketching the Sierra Morena landscapes while she typed away on her laptop, her bare feet tangled with mine under the table. Our life together was a tapestry of small Americanisms grafted onto Spanish soil. Lazy Sundays with bootleg Netflix streams of old rom-coms, her belting out Springsteen in the shower while I burned paella in the kitchen. Cora made me braver, pulling me out of my shell with her unapologetic fire. "Life's too short for what-ifs, Mads," she'd say, tracing lazy circles on my thigh as we watched the stars prick the velvet sky from our rooftop terrace. And in those moments, with her head on my chest and the distant strum of a guitar floating up from the streets below, I thought we'd cracked the code to happiness. Two lost souls stitching themselves into something whole. But cracks form in the best foundations, especially when built on borrowed time. It started with the letters. Unmarked envelopes slipping under our door like guilty intruders, postmarked from Chicago. Cora would snatch them up before I could ask, her face tightening into that lawyer's mask she thought I didn't notice. "Bills," she'd mutter, stuffing them into her satchel. I let it slide at first. Trust is a muscle you have to flex gently after betrayals left it atrophied. My ex-husband's affairs had taught me that much. But curiosity is a persistent itch, and one humid afternoon while she was out interviewing a local vintner, I gave in. The top envelope held a photo. Cora younger, radiant in a white sundress, arm linked with a tall brunette woman whose smile screamed possession. Scrawled on the back in elegant script. "Remember us, darling? She's not you. Come home." My stomach twisted, a cold knot of realization forming. There were more emails printed on crisp letterhead from a firm I'd never heard of, pleading for reconciliation, promising the life they'd built before it crumbled. Elena, her name was. The yoga instructor hadn't been the end. Elena had been the wreckage, the one who'd clawed her way back after Cora fled to Spain. I confronted her that night over a dinner I couldn't stomach, gazpacho gone watery in the fridge. "Who's Elena?" The words hung heavy, accusatory. Cora froze, fork midway to her mouth, her blue eyes widening like a deer in headlights. An ex-ancient history. But her voice wavered and I pressed, the hurt spilling out in a torrent I'd bottled too long. Turns out, Elena wasn't just an ex. She was the fiancé Cora had left at the altar 2 years prior. The one whose ring she'd pawned to fund her escape across the Atlantic. "I couldn't breathe in that life," Cora confessed, tears carving tracks down her cheeks. She wanted the picket fence, the 2.4 kids, the whole American dream. But I needed more. I needed to find myself. It gutted me, that confession. Not the betrayal itself, but the parallel to my own ghosts. I'd run from my marriage the same way, fleeing the script I'd been handed. We patched it with promises, with nights tangled in sheets that smelled of lavender and sea salt, whispering vows to outrun our pasts together. But Elena's letters kept coming, each one a barb sinking deeper. And then the call. I overheard it one evening as I returned early from a sketching class in town. Cora's voice, low and urgent, on the balcony. "No, Elena, I can't. Madeline doesn't know about the money. Please just let it go." "Money? What money?" The pieces fell into place over the next week. A puzzle I wished I'd left unsolved. Cora hadn't just fled. She'd embezzled from Elena's family firm. A desperate grab for freedom that left her drowning in debt and paranoia. The letters weren't pleas. They were threats, veiled demands for repayment wrapped in nostalgia. She'd hidden it all, building our fragile paradise on a foundation of lies. The betrayal stung like salt in fresh wounds, not because she'd stolen, but because she'd stolen my trust too, making me complicit in her silence. I packed that night, the zipper of my duffel bag echoing like gunfire in the quiet villa. "How could you?" I whispered, more to myself than her, as rain lashed the windows, the first storm of the season, biblical in its fury. Cora begged, her hands clutching mine, but the fire in her eyes had dimmed to embers. "I was scared, Mads. Scared I'd lose you if you knew the mess I am." I left her there, curled on the floor amid the debris of our life, the door clicking shut behind me like the end of an era. Seville swallowed me whole in the days that followed, its labyrinthine streets a mirror to my unraveling heart. I crashed at a youth hostel near the Alcazar, sketching feverishly by day, twisted olive branches, shadowed cathedrals, to drown out the ache. Friends back home texted platitudes. "You'll find someone better." But better felt impossible. Cora had been my mirror, reflecting the parts of me I'd only just begun to love. Nights blurred into bars where I nursed sangria and eavesdropped on lovers' quarrels, wondering if this was the curse of us queers, always loving with the ferocity of the forbidden, only to watch it burn. Word travels fast in expat circles, and it wasn't long before Elena found me. She appeared like a specter at a tapas joint in Triana, elegant in a silk blouse that screamed old money, her dark hair pulled into a chignon that accentuated the sharp lines of her face. 35, poised, with eyes like polished obsidian that saw right through my feigned nonchalance. "Madeline Harper? I'm Elena Vasquez. We need to talk." We did, over plates of jamon iberico that tasted like ash. She wasn't the villain I'd imagined, no cackling harpy, but a woman hollowed by loss, her voice steady but laced with the quiet rage of the jilted. "Cora didn't tell you about the money, did she? Or how she planned it all? Our wedding, the firm, me as her escape hatch." The details poured out. The engagement Cora had engineered for the security, the funds siphoned not for freedom, but to bankroll a novel she never finished. Elena had forgiven the theft in time but not the erasure, the way Cora had painted her as the cage when she'd been the key. "Why tell me?" I asked, my voice small against the flamenco guitar strumming in the corner. Elena's smile was bittersweet, a crack in her armor. Because I loved her once. And I see the way she's breaking you just like she broke me. You deserve the truth, Madeline. And maybe forgiveness for both of us. I didn't sleep that night. The hostel's thin walls doing nothing to muffle the couple's murmurs or my own churning thoughts. Betrayal layered upon betrayal, but beneath it, a thread of humanity. We were all just women fumbling toward light, scarred by the weights we carried. By dawn I'd made my choice. Not absolution but confrontation. One last stand in the Colosseum of our love. The bus to the villa took an eternity, the road winding through cork oak forests that blurred into green haze. Cora opened the door looking like she'd aged a decade, her blonde hair unkempt, eyes shadowed with the kind of despair that etches lines too soon. Mads? What are you? I talked to Elena. I cut in, stepping inside without invitation, the familiar scent of her jasmine and ink hitting me like a wave. She deflated, sinking onto the sofa, head in hands. The story tumbled out then, unvarnished. The money, the lies, the fear that had chained her more than any engagement ever could. I wanted to be worthy of you, she sobbed. Of us. But I was running from myself, and I dragged you into the mud. We talked for hours, the sun arcing across the sky like a reluctant witness. No grand gestures, no cinematic redemption. Just two women peeling back layers, exposing the rot and the roots. I saw her then, not as the betrayer, but as the girl from Huelva Cafe. Flawed, fierce, achingly human. I can't promise perfection, I said finally, my hand finding hers. But I can promise presence. If you fight for this, for you, I'll fight too. She nodded, tears mingling with a tentative smile. And in that fragile truce, something shifted. Not fireworks but embers reigniting. Weeks blurred into a tentative rhythm. Cora sold the villa, using the proceeds to settle her debts with Elena. A clean break wired across oceans, accompanied by a letter Cora wrote by hand, words I'd helped shape, apologies without excuses, gratitude without pity. Elena's response came via email, simple and profound. Healing isn't erasure. It's expansion. Be free, both of you. We moved to a smaller casita in the hills near Ronda. A place with whitewashed walls and a garden that demanded tending. Mornings became ours again. Me sketching wildflowers while Cora read aloud from her manuscript, finally giving voice to the stories she'd silenced. We hosted dinners for expat friends, queer folks from all corners, sharing tales of reinvention over homemade empanadas and bottles of manzanilla. Laughter echoed off the stones, a balm to old wounds. But peace isn't linear. Shadows lingered. Cora's nightmares woke us some nights, her thrashing against ghosts of what-ifs. I'd hold her then, whispering affirmations into the dark. You're here. We're here. And in vulnerability we grew, therapy sessions via Zoom with a counselor back in the States, walks along cliff paths where we'd air grievances like laundry on the line. Betrayal had cracked us open, but from the fissures bloomed empathy, a deeper love forged in the kiln of survival. The turning point came on a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the air nips with promise. We'd invited no one, just us, a wood-fired pizza from the village oven, margarita, extra basil, because Cora knew it was my weakness, and a playlist of Joan Baez crooning from the kitchen radio. The villa's heart, that same kitchen where plates had shattered and hearts had mended, glowed under strings of Edison bulbs we'd hung together. We ate cross-legged on the floor, grease-slicked fingers brushing as we passed slices, trading stories of our pre-Spain selves like trading cards. You're my plot twist, you know that? Cora said suddenly, her voice soft against the sizzle of the cooling oven. I laughed, wiping sauce from her chin, but she didn't join in. Instead, she set her plate aside, the shift in her posture pulling me upright. Blue eyes met hazel, steady now, unshadowed. Madeline Harper, you saw me when I was invisible, even to myself. You stayed when running would have been easier. I don't have grand speeches, but I have this. She slid to her knees then, right there on the worn tiles, the motion graceful and deliberate, pulling a small velvet box from her jeans pocket. My breath caught, the world narrowing to the glint of silver inside. A simple band etched with olive leaves, symbol of the groves that had witnessed our unraveling and rebirth. Marry me? Not to escape, not to prove anything. Just to build. With you. Tears blurred my vision, hot and unbidden, as the weight of it settled. Not a cage but a choice. The kitchen, once a battlefield, now a sanctuary. I nodded, words failing. pulling her up into an embrace that tasted of tomato and forever. Yes, I whispered finally, the word blooming like the jacarandas of that first kiss. 1,000 times yes. We didn't rush the wedding. Spain's bureaucracy is a beast, and besides we savored the betrothal like a slow-cooked stew. Vows exchanged in a civil ceremony at the Ronda Bridge, with a handful of friends and a stray cat as witness, followed by a reception of laughter and Lorca poems recited under lantern light. No white dresses or tiered cakes. Just us in linen and love, dancing to the rhythm of our own making. Life post-vows wasn't fairy tale flawless. Cora's book deal came with revisions that tested our patience, and my visa extensions involved paperwork marathons that left us cursing in Spanglish. But in the quiet victories, the first review praising her honesty, the gallery show in Malaga that sold my sketches, we found grace. Betrayal had been our crucible, refining us into something resilient, something real. Looking back from our casita porch as the sun dips behind the Serrania, I see it clear. Love isn't the absence of storm, but the courage to rebuild after. Cora's hand in mine, her head on my shoulder, the distant call of a nightingale. We're not perfect, but we're present. And in this western corner of Spain, far from the American dreams we once chased, we've carved our own. A humanism born of hurt, a romance etched in olive and earth. Two women, knees scarred from kneeling, rising together into the light. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, tucked into the crease of a well-worn postcard from New York. Empire State Building at dusk, all neon promise against a bruised sky. Pizza at mine? 7 p.m. No ghosts allowed. See it read. Her handwriting looping like the hills we'd hiked last spring. I stared at it over coffee in the village square, the steam curling like question marks. 6 months since the shatter, 3 since Elena's truths, and now this? My thumb traced the ink, pulse quickening with the old familiar pull. Hope laced with wariness, the addict's itch for one more hit. I almost didn't go. The bus from Ronda rattled my resolve, winding through valleys dotted with cork trees stripped bare for harvest, their reddish bark like flayed skin under the relentless sun. What was I doing? Chasing closure? Or just the curve of her smile? By the time I stepped off in Huelva, the coastal humidity clinging to my skin like second thoughts, I'd convinced myself it was pizza, nothing more. Friends only, boundaries firm as the stone walls of the old town. Cora's apartment hadn't changed. The same bougainvillea-choked balcony overlooking the Odiel River, the air thick with salt and the faint brine of the nearby port. She opened the door in cut-off jeans and a faded Cubs tee, flour dusted across her cheek like war paint. Her blonde hair piled into a messy bun that begged to be undone. "You came," she said, breath catching just enough to betray her. No embrace, just a nod toward the kitchen, where the oven hummed with domestic magic. We ate on the fire escape, her idea, plates balanced on knees, the city lights twinkling below like scattered diamonds. Cheese stretched in gooey strings as we bit in, the silence companionable at first, broken by her recounting a disastrous blind date with a British painter who'd quoted Keats over calamari. Turns out, beauty is truth doesn't cover his habit of leaving turpentine in the fridge. I laughed, the sound rusty but genuine, and for a moment it was easy, two friends dissecting the absurdity of single life in Spain. But wine loosens tongues and Rioja has a way of unearthing buried roots. Midway through our second glass, Cora set hers down, the clink sharp against the metal railing. "I owe you an apology, Mads. A real one, not the half-assed crap I spewed before." Her eyes, those blues that could storm or soothe, held mine steady. I didn't just lie about the money. I lied about why. It wasn't escape, it was shame. Shame that I couldn't be the partner Elena deserved, or the woman I pretended to be back home. The admission hung there, vulnerable as an exposed nerve. I wanted to bolt, but her hand on my arm anchored me. Growing up in that Bible Belt suburb, I learned early. Love like ours is a sin to be repented. So I built walls, law school, the firm, Elena as my shield. When it crumbled, I ran here, thinking distance would rewrite the script. But you made me want to burn the damn thing. Tears pricked my eyes, not from hurt but recognition. My own Brooklyn upbringing, Catholic guilt wrapped in rainbow flags waved at pride but hidden in family dinners, mirrored hers too closely. "I get it," I murmured. "My ex? He was my alibi. Straight Madeline check. But with you I didn't have to perform. We talked until the stars wheeled overhead, the pizza cold and forgotten. She confessed the letter's toll. Elena's forgiveness a double-edged sword, slicing open old doubts. I pushed you away because I didn't deserve you. Still don't, maybe. I shook my head, words tumbling out. How her betrayal had forced my growth, how Elena's visit had humanized us all. We're not villains in each other's stories, Cora. Just chapters. Dawn crept in, painting the river gold, and when she walked me to the door, the air crackled with unspoken possibility. Stay, she whispered, not a plea but an invitation. I did, for coffee turned breakfast, for stories swapped over churros dipped in thick chocolate. Not reconciliation, not yet, but a bridge, tentative and trembling, spanning the chasm we'd carved. Word of our truce spread like wildfire through the expat grapevine, eliciting raised eyebrows and knowing winks at the Friday market. Back together, eh? Teased Javier, the greengrocer with a mustache like a broom and gossip sharper than his knives. I bought extra lemons to hide my flush, but Cora just grinned, linking her arm through mine as we wandered the stalls. Let him talk. We've earned the spectacle. Rebuilding wasn't linear. It was a dance, 2 steps forward, 1 back into therapy's safe harbor. Cora's sessions unearthed more. The internalized homophobia that had her second-guessing every touch, every glance. Mine dredged up the divorce's residue. Trust fractured like the china I'd hurled in rage. But in the sharing we mended, weaving safety nets from vulnerability. Autumn deepened, leaves turning the banana into a palette of rust and amber. We took a trip there, camping under a sky unpolluted by city glare. The only sounds the rustle of dunes and our hushed confessions around the fire. What if we'd met in Chicago? She mused, poking at embers with a stick. Or Brooklyn? Would we have been brave enough? I leaned into her, the warmth of her side chasing the chill. Doesn't matter. We're brave now. That night, as shooting stars streaked overhead, we made love. Not with the frantic passion of new lovers, but slow, reverent, mapping scars like constellations. It was healing, holy in its honesty. Back in Huelva, life asserted its mundane miracles. Cora's manuscript found a publisher. A small press in Barcelona hungry for queer voices from the diaspora, and revisions became our shared labor. Me reading drafts aloud while she paced, notebook in hand. My art flourished too. A series of mixed media pieces on fractured identities caught the eye of a gallerist in Seville, leading to my first solo show. Opening night, Cora stood front row, her pride a tangible force, toasting me with cava that tasted like victory. Yet conflict simmered beneath the surface, as it does in all dramas worth their salt. Elena's shadow lengthened with the winter solstice. A package arrived unannounced. A leather-bound journal, Cora's from their engagement days, filled with sketches of wedding venues and pressed flowers from proposal bouquets. No note, just the weight of memory. Cora paled, slamming it shut like a cursed tome. She knows where I live. How? We traced it to a mutual friend, well-intentioned but boundary-blind, who'd forwarded it thinking closure a gift. But for Cora it was intrusion. A reminder that pasts don't dissolve, they echo. Paranoia crept in. Locked doors, checked mail, nights where she'd startle awake. Convinced footsteps patrolled the balcony. What if she comes for me? For us? She'd whisper, her body rigid against mine. The climax built like a sirocco wind, hot and inexorable. It broke on Christmas Eve, the port lights twinkling like defiant stars against a squall. Elena appeared at our door, soaked and shivering, not as conqueror but refugee, fired from the firm for covering Cora's tracks, her family disowning the scandal. I need her to know it was worth it, she said, voice breaking. The forgiveness. The letting go. Cora froze in the threshold, me a silent sentinel behind. What followed was no fistfight, no screaming match, but a reckoning raw as winter rain. Elena laid bare her own betrayals, staying silent on Cora's doubts, pushing the engagement to salvage her ego. I caged us both. Cora listened, then spoke, words I'd helped rehearse steady and unflinching. Thank you for the journal. For the truth. But this chapter's closed. Write your own now. Elena left with a nod, the door sealing not enmity but empathy. In the aftermath, Cora collapsed into me, sobs racking her frame. I thought I'd never forgive her. Or myself. I held her, murmuring, forgiveness isn't absolution. It's space to breathe. Spring unfurled like a promise kept, the almond blossoms carpeting the hills in pink snow. We marked our recommitment quietly. A ring exchange on the beach at Mazagon, toes buried in sand, vows renewed against the crash of waves. Through betrayals and bridges, Cora said, sliding the band, now etched with a wave onto my finger. To us. The year turned, our love a quiet revolution. Cora's book launched to acclaim. A memoir of exile and emergence that resonated from Madrid to Manhattan. My gallery show toured. Panels discussing queer cartographies, drawing crowds hungry for stories like ours. We became fixtures in Huelva's scene. Mentors to younger expats navigating their own comings out. Hosting potlucks where tales of resilience flowed freer than the wine. Yet the humanism of it all lay in the ordinary. Lazy mornings with coffee and crosswords, arguments over whose turn it was to fetch bread from the bakery, reconciliation sealed with forehead kisses. Betrayal had been our antagonist, but compassion our hero. Forging not just survival but thriving. One evening as we strolled the Odio estuary at dusk, heron silhouetted against the fading light, Cora squeezed my hand. That pizza night. Best bad idea I ever had. I laughed, pulling her close. Surprised me then. Still do. In the tapestry of our lives, American hearts in Spanish soil, we'd woven something enduring. Love not as fairy tale but as fierce, flawed humanity. And in that we found our ever after, not perfect but profoundly ours. The proposal lingered like the aftertaste of that pizza. Savory, surprising, a flavor you couldn't quite place but craved all the same. We'd set a date for the wedding, Luce's Spanish summer. Sometime after the feria in May, when the streets ran with laughter and the air hummed with possibility. But life, that capricious storyteller, had other drafts in mind. It started with a letter, not Elena's vengeful scrawls, but one from Cora's publisher. An advance for a sequel contingent on a U.S. book tour. Chicago, New York, LA, the works, she read aloud over breakfast, her excitement tempered by the shadow in my eyes. It's a chance to face the ghosts on my terms. I nodded, forcing a smile around my tostada con tomate, but inside the old fears stirred. Distance had birthed our first fracture. Could it nurture this mending one? She left in June, the airport in Seville a blur of tear-streaked goodbyes and promises pinged via WhatsApp. Miss you already, her texts came, interspersed with selfies. Cora at a signing in a bookstore smelling of fresh ink, her smile bright but her eyes searching the crowd for familiar faces. I buried myself in work, commissions for a travel mag, sketches of Rhonda's gorge that captured the vertigo of longing. Friends rallied. Tapas nights with Sophia, the fiery photographer from Triana, who declared, absence makes the heart grow fonder, or the lawyer grow wiser. Bet on the latter. But wisdom is a slow bloom, and July's heat wave tested it. News trickled back via mutuals. Cora spotted at a panel with Elena. The two huddled in post-talk chatter, heads bent like conspirators. Professional courtesy, Sophia assured, scrolling X for proof. The photo confirmed it. Arm's length, polite smiles, but the caption nod. Reunited rivals or literary power duo. Queerlit revival. My stomach nodded, echoes of old betrayals whispering doubts. I confronted her over a glitchy video call. The connection fuzzing like my resolve. What's going on with Elena? Cora's face pixelated, then cleared, her expression crumpling. It's nothing, Mads. She moderated the panel. We talked about the book closure. She's engaged now to a doctor in Boston. Relief washed over me, mingled with shame for the suspicion. I'm sorry, I muttered. The waiting. It amplifies everything. She nodded, eyes soft. I get it. Trust is a rebuild, not a reset. When I get home we'll talk it all out, no filters. The tour dragged into August, cities blurring into a montage of hotel lobbies in Cuenaz. I flew to New York for the finale, surprising her at a rooftop reading overlooking the Hudson. The city lights danced like fireflies as she spotted me in the crowd, her voice faltering mid-sentence before she launched into the crowd, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of jet fuel and home. We spent 3 days wandering Manhattan Central Park picnics with bodega pizza, a nod to our origins, thrift shop hopping in the village for vintage rings to stack with our betrothal bands. This city's chaos feels like us, Cora said, linking arms as we dodged tourists on the High Line. Messy alive. But beneath the joy, the tour had unearthed fissures. The applause a high, but the questions. How autobiographical is the betrayal? A low that left her raw. Back in Spain, the wedding planning became our anchor. No lavish affair. We opted for intimate. A civil ceremony in a cliffside chapel near Tarifa, where Africa kissed Europe across the strait. Invites went to a dozen. Sophia and her girlfriend, Javier with his tales, even Elena, via a cautious email that yielded a gracious RSVP. Honored to witness your joy. With peace E. September brought the winds of change, literal and figurative. A storm battered the coast, uprooting our garden and flooding the casita's cellar. In the cleanup, knee-deep in mud, we laughed through the frustration. Cora wielding a mop like a sword, me salvaging sketches with prayers to the patron saint of artists. This is us, she declared, flinging a sponge my way. Storms pass, we mop up. But the real tempest brewed internally. Cora's sequel stalled, the weight of expectation crushing her muse. What if I can't deliver? What if it's all I have? She'd fret, staring at blank screens. I countered with walks along the estuary, where we'd collect sea glass, jagged edges smoothed by time. Your story's evolving. Let it. October's full moon lit our rehearsal dinner on the beach, bonfire crackling as friends toasted with manzanilla. Elena arrived last, elegant in a linen shift, her fiancé, a kind-eyed woman named Riley, on her arm. The air thickened as they approached, but Cora met her with open arms, a hug that lingered just long enough to heal. Thank you for coming, Cora said, voice thick. Elena's reply was simple. Love wins its own wars. The wedding dawned clear, the strait a mirror of azure. I walked the aisle, sand instead of stone, in a flowing gown of ivory lace, wildflowers woven into my curls. Cora waited at the arch, blonde hair windswept, blue eyes shining like the sea. Vows exchanged were ours. I choose you in fractures and freedoms, I said. Through every rewrite, she echoed. The reception spilled into dusk, guitars strumming Belarius, tables groaning under paella and prawns. As stars pricked the sky, Cora pulled me to dance, our bodies swaying to an unseen rhythm. Surprised yet? She whispered, echoing that kitchen night. I laughed, tears pricking. Every day. Post-wedding glow faded into autumn's hush, but challenges persisted. Cora's book hit snags. Editor notes demanding deeper dives into betrayal's aftermath, stirring nightmares anew. My own exhibit toured to mixed reviews, one critic dismissing it as expat nostalgia porn. Doubts crept. Were we building on sand? The climax crested in November. A call from Chicago, Elena's firm, suing Cora for defamation over the memoir's veiled references. It's baseless, her lawyer assured, but the threat loomed, dredging legal fees and media scrutiny. Reporters hounded our door, ablaze with lesbian lit drama. Cora spiraled, the woman who'd fled one cage now trapped in another's glare. We fought it together. Lawyers consulted over Zoom, statements crafted with care. But the strain fractured us. Arguments flaring over strategy, silences heavy as lead. I can't lose you to this, I pleaded one night, rain lashing the windows. Cora's response broke me. Then maybe you should go, before I drag you under. I didn't. Instead, I rallied our circle, Sophia's photos for a counter-narrative, Javier's connections to local press. Elena called, voice contrite. It wasn't me. The partners' old grudges. She testified on our behalf, her words in deposition a bomb. Cora's truth hurt, but it freed us all. The suit crumbled by December, dismissed as vindictive overreach. Victory tasted bittersweet, but in the ashes we rose stronger. Cora channeling the ordeal into a blistering essay on queer erasure and publishing, me painting a triptych. Betrayal, bridge, becoming. Winter wrapped us in quiet triumph. New Year's found us on the balcony, fireworks bursting over the port. To surprises, Cora toasted, her ring catching the light. I clinked glasses, heart full. And the women who kneel for them. Our story didn't end there. Life's a series, not a singleton. We adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier named Olive, who tripped us into laughter on daily walks. Cora's sequel soared. A manifesto on forgiveness that won awards. My art found its voice in installations exploring diaspora desires. Years on from our expanded casita. Now with a studio wing we mentor. Workshops for young queers, tales of resilience shared over virtual pizzas. Betrayal's scar fades to silver. A reminder that love's drama lies in the human heart. Flawed, fierce, forever rewriting. In the end, it's not the highs or lows but the holding on that humanizes us. Cora and I, knees battle-worn from kneeling. In proposal, in pain, in promise, stand taller for it. And in Western Spain's embrace, our American souls found not just romance but redemption. A life surprised at every turn by grace.